I had never been the kind of woman to flinch at shadows. I was 60 years old, my hair streaked with gray, my hands lined from years of raising children, scrubbing floors, and holding a family together through storms no one else saw coming. Yet that night, standing in the dim hallway of my daughter's house, I felt fear seep into my bones the way cold rain seeps into cracks in the earth. It was past midnight, and the house was supposed to be asleep. My daughter, Anna, had kissed me on the cheek earlier, told me she was glad I had moved in just for a while, until I got back on my feet after my surgery. Her voice had sounded sweet, but something in her eyes unsettled me. She was distant, almost rehearsed, as if she were reading a line from a script rather than speaking from her heart. I had ignored it, convincing myself that she was simply tired. My son, Neela Daniel, had been quieter too, but he was never warm with me, so I brushed it off. I had gone to bed early, my aching legs grateful for the rest, and the house fell silent. Or so I thought. The sound woke me first, a hushed murmur drifting through the walls. I turned in bed, blinking at the ceiling. The voice was low, steady, and too close to be a dream. I slid from under the covers, careful not to make the old mattress creak, and pressed my feet to the cold floor. The whispers were coming from the kitchen. I should have ignored them. I should have told myself it was none of my business. But something sharp in Daniel's tone sliced through the wall, and curiosity gripped me. I pulled my robe tight, padded into the hallway, and froze when I caught the words, "She's old, Anna, helpless. Do you really want to waste years taking care of her? We could get rid of her quietly, and no one would ask questions. Think about the money, the house, everything she still owns. It should be ours, not hers." My breath caught in my throat, my knees nearly buckled. For a moment I wondered if I had imagined it, if the shadows were tricking me. But then Anna's voice answered, hesitant and trembling. "Daniel, she's my mother. I can't just—" "You can," he hissed. "She won't fight back. She trusts you. We'll make it look natural. An accident in the bathroom, a fall down the stairs. People will pity you, and will inherit everything. Don't be weak." My heart pounded so hard I feared it would burst through my chest. The man my daughter had married, the man who smiled at family dinners and shook my hand every holiday, was planning to kill me. And Anna, my sweet girl, wasn't stopping him. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. The kitchen light cast a thin glow into the hallway, enough for me to see their shadows flickering on the wall. Daniel stood close to her, his voice dripping poison, his hands moving as though sealing a packed dot. Anna whispered something I couldn't hear. Daniel's shadow leaned in, and his voice dropped again, so soft it was nearly swallowed by the night. "She will not survive this month. Trust me." A tremor ran through me. My body begged me to run back to my room, shut the door, and pretend none of it was real. But my instinct screamed that if I did, I would not live to see the sunrise. I stepped backward, careful not to make the floorboards creak. Every nerve in my body was stretched thin. My lungs burned from holding my breath. I reached my room, slipped inside, and pressed my back against the door. The silence of the room felt cruel. My heart hammered against the wood as though begging for escape. I forced myself to think, to plan. I was trapped in their house, surrounded by their lies, and I was suddenly the prey in a trap I hadn't even seen being set. I knew I had to get out, but how? My bag sat in the corner, half-packed from when I arrived. My phone was on the nightstand, its battery half-drained. I picked it up, but my hands trembled too much to dial. Who would I call? The police? What would I say? They would laugh, or worse, they would call Anna to confirm, and then my daughter and Daniel would know I had heard everything. I lowered the phone, clutching it in my palm like a useless weapon. Then I heard the footsteps, slow, heavy, moving toward my door. I froze. The doorknob twitched, just slightly, as if someone was testing it. I held my breath, praying they would think I was asleep. The knob stilled, and after a long pause, the footsteps retreated. That was my warning. If I stayed, I would not see morning. I grabbed my bag, shoved my phone inside, and pulled on my shoes with hands that shook so badly I could barely tie the laces. Every sound in the house became amplified, the ticking clock, the wind scratching against the window, the creak of the floorboards. My senses were sharp with terror, every second stretching into eternity. I eased open the window. The cold night air slapped my face, and for a moment I hesitated, staring into the darkness outside. It was a 10-foot drop to the ground. My legs could barely handle stairs, let alone a jump. But the alternative was worse. Behind me, the floor groaned. A voice whispered faintly down the hall. I climbed onto the window ledge, my bag strapped across my shoulder. my breath ragged in my throat, and then, with the same stubbornness that had carried me through every hardship in life, I swung my legs out and pushed myself into the night. The ground rose to meet me with brutal force. Pain shot up my leg, but I bit back a cry. I staggered to my feet, clutching my bag, and ran into the darkness of the street. Every step fueled by the knowledge that if I faltered, Daniel's plan would become my reality. That was the night I escaped my son-in-law's trap. That was the night I learned my daughter had chosen silence over saving me. And that was the night I swore I would not only survive but uncover the truth behind their scheme. If you are watching this, subscribe and tell me where you are watching from. This story is only beginning, and you need to hear what happened next. The night air was sharp in my lungs as I stumbled down the street, one hand gripping the strap of my bag and the other pressed against my aching leg. The fall from the window had left me bruised, but pain was nothing compared to the terror clawing at me. Behind me, the house loomed in darkness, a prison disguised as a home. Every step I took away from it felt like defiance, but also like danger. I half expected the door to burst open, Daniel's silhouette flooding the porch light, his voice slicing the night as he called after me. I imagined his heavy footsteps, pounding down the steps, his hands reaching for me, dragging me back inside where no one would ever hear me scream. That thought quickened my pace, even as my leg begged me to stop. The street was silent. No cars passed. No curtains twitched. The neighborhood, which had seemed safe and suburban when I first arrived, now felt like a stage where shadows conspired. I searched desperately for lights, for signs of life, but every house seemed locked tight in sleep. I reached the corner and leaned against a lamppost, my chest heaving. My phone burned in my pocket, but I was afraid to turn it on. What if Daniel had tampered with it? What if Anna could track me? Paranoia had already settled into my mind, whispering questions I could not answer. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Where could I go at this hour? Who could I trust? My sister, Margaret, lived 2 towns over, but she was frail herself, recovering from an illness. The last thing she needed was my chaos. My old friend Helen had moved across the country. The truth hit me with brutal clarity. I had no one close by. A bus stop appeared ahead, its bench gleaming faintly under the streetlight. I dragged myself toward it and collapsed onto the cold metal. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone. I stared at the screen, my reflection fractured against the faint glow. Call the police, a voice inside me urged. Tell them what you heard. But another voice countered, sharper and more cunning. Whispers are not evidence. Daniel will deny it. Anna will protect him. And you will be the one painted as paranoid, unstable, senile. That voice was cruel, but it was right. I had seen enough stories to know how easily the vulnerable are dismissed. So I sat there, trapped between action and silence, until the rumble of an approaching bus pulled me from my spiral. Headlights cut through the night, and the vehicle groaned to a stop before me. The driver gave me a curious glance as I climbed aboard, fumbling with coins. He didn't ask why I was boarding at such an hour, didn't question the fear etched on my face. He simply nodded and pulled away. I sank into a seat near the back, clutching my bag. The empty bus swayed gently, its hum almost lulling, but my mind refused rest. Instead, it replayed every detail of the whispers, every inflection in Daniel's voice, every hesitation in Anna's. She's old, helpless, she will not survive this month. The words were knives, cutting deeper with each repetition. My daughter, my only child, the baby I had rocked to sleep, the girl whose scraped knees I had kissed, had sat silently while her husband plotted my death. Worse, she had not screamed in outrage, had not run to me with warnings. She had listened. Why? What had I done to deserve such betrayal? Was I such a burden that my own flesh and blood could entertain the thought of ending me for convenience? The bus rattled on, carrying me further from the house that no longer felt like home. Street after street passed, until the driver finally called back that it was the last stop. I nodded, gathered my courage, and stepped into another unfamiliar neighborhood. This one was busier, with a gas station glowing at the corner and a diner across the street. I staggered toward the diner, drawn by the promise of light, warmth, and people. My reflection in the glass door startled me, hair disheveled, eyes wide with fear, face pale as paper. I looked like a woman on the run, and in truth, I was. The bell jingled as I entered. A few late-night patrons glanced up, then back to their plates. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and kind hands, approached with a polite smile. "Coffee?" she asked. Double quotes. "Yes, please," I whispered, sinking into a booth. She brought the cup quickly, steam curling into the air. I wrapped my hands around it, grateful for the warmth. The diner felt safe, but only in the way a lifeboat feels safe in the middle of the ocean. It was temporary. I sipped slowly, my mind spinning. I needed a plan. Running blindly would only keep me alive for a night, maybe two. Daniel was clever. If he suspected I had overheard him, he would hunt me down. The thought made me shiver so violently the cup rattled against the saucer. "Are you all right, ma'am?" the waitress asked softly, concern flickering in her eyes. I forced a smile. "Just a rough night, thank you." She nodded, though her gaze lingered. For a moment, I considered confiding in her, spilling everything in a desperate plea for help. But what would she do? Call the police? That same dead end awaited me. Instead, I asked, "Is there a motel nearby?" "2 blocks down, across from the pharmacy," she said gently. I thanked her, paid for the coffee, and stepped back into the night. The motel's neon sign buzzed faintly when I arrived, and the clerk barely glanced at me as he handed me a key. The room was small, its wallpaper peeling, but it was mine. A door I could lock. I collapsed onto the bed, my body trembling from exhaustion, but sleep refused me. Instead, I lay staring at the ceiling, listening for footsteps that never came. In the silence, memories intruded. Anna as a child, tugging my hand at the park. Anna as a teenager, slamming her door after an argument. Anna in her wedding dress, tears of joy on her cheeks as I told her she was beautiful. Had I missed the signs? Had there always been a crack in her love for me? One that widened over the years until Daniel slipped inside and poisoned it completely. The questions tore at me until dawn seeped through the thin curtains. The world outside carried on as though nothing had changed. Yet for me, everything had. That morning, I made my decision. Running was not enough. If I stayed hidden, Daniel would spin the story however he wished. If I returned, I would be walking into my grave. No, I would not cower. I would not be the helpless old woman he believed me to be. I would gather proof. I would expose his plan. And if my daughter had truly chosen his side, then she would face the truth alongside him. As I stood in that shabby motel room, I realized the escape was only the beginning. The real battle was about to start. If you are watching this, subscribe and tell me what you would have done in my place. The next part of this story will make your blood run cold. Asterisk, the motel walls felt like paper. Thin enough to let the world seep through, but not thick enough to keep my fears out. All night I had tossed and turned, listening to the hum of the neon sign outside and the occasional rumble of passing cars. My body begged for rest, yet my mind refused to loosen its grip on the terror of what I had overheard. When the first streaks of daylight pierced the curtains, I sat up, my body stiff from the narrow bed. A decision weighed on me heavier than the ache in my bones. I could not keep running aimlessly. I needed a strategy. Something stronger than fear. I pulled my phone from my bag and stared at the dark screen. The battery was nearly drained. I had avoided turning it on all night, worried Daniel or Anna might somehow track me, though I had no proof of such things. Fear made you imagine threats, even in the mundane. Still, the phone was my only connection to the world. I powered it on, the glow illuminating my worn face. No missed calls, no messages. For a fleeting moment, I felt relief, until the emptiness of the screen twisted that relief into something bitter. Did Anna not notice my absence? Did she not care that her mother had vanished in the middle of the night? I forced myself to focus. I opened the Maps app and searched for the nearest library. If I was to fight Daniel, I needed knowledge. I needed to understand my rights, the laws, the ways I could protect myself without tipping him off. The library was a 15-minute walk, according to the map. My leg protested the thought, but determination outweighed pain. I checked out of the motel, clutching my bag tightly as if it contained not just clothes but my very survival. The morning air was crisp, the streets waking slowly with joggers and shopkeepers. I felt exposed among them, like a hunted animal hiding in plain sight. The library loomed ahead, its brick facade sturdy and reassuring. Inside, the smell of old paper wrapped around me, oddly comforting. I found a quiet corner, opened an ancient desktop computer, and began searching. I typed words with trembling fingers: inheritance laws, elder abuse, recording evidence secretly, how to prove someone is planning harm. Each article pulled me deeper into a world I had never expected to navigate. The truth was both empowering and horrifying. I learned that Daniel could indeed manipulate circumstances if I had no proof. If I died in a fall, no one would question it. If Anna remained silent, his version of events would stand unchallenged. My pulse quickened as I scrolled. What I needed was evidence. Words alone would not save me. I needed recordings, documents, something tangible that no smooth-talking son-in-law could dismiss. The thought of returning to that house made bile rise in my throat, but a colder, sharper part of me recognized it might be necessary. The whispers I overheard were not enough. I needed him on record, confessing in his own voice, or I would always be the paranoid old woman fleeing shadows. I shut the computer down and leaned back in the chair, the weight of my plan settling on my shoulders. Could I do it? Could I face the very man who had plotted my death and pretend I knew nothing, just to catch him in his lies? The answer came to me as clear as the sunlight pouring through the windows. I had survived worse storms in my life. I had raised a child alone after my husband left, worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, endured nights of hunger so Anna could eat. I was not weak. I would not let Daniel write my ending. I rose, squared my shoulders, and left the library. At a small electronics store nearby, I purchased a cheap voice recorder and a spare phone charger. The cashier didn't ask questions as I counted out the cash, but his eyes lingered a moment too long on the bruise blossoming on my leg from my fall. I ignored it, clutching the bag tightly as though it contained a weapon. I rented another motel room across town. The walk drained me, but when I locked the door behind me, I felt a flicker of control return. I unpacked the recorder, tested it, and listened to the tiny playback. My voice crackled back at me, shaky but clear. That night, I rehearsed. I imagined conversations with Daniel, how I could draw him into revealing his intent again. My stomach turned at the thought of being near him, but practice dulled the edge of my fear. By the second hour, my body trembled with exhaustion. I lay back on the bed, the recorder resting on my chest, and whispered to the empty room, "You will not take my life from me." Sleep came at last, heavy and dreamless. The next morning, I awoke to the buzz of my phone. My heart leaped, certain it was Anna or Daniel, but the screen showed an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered, "Is this Mrs. Harris?" A voice asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is Dr. Patel's office. You missed your follow-up appointment yesterday. We wanted to check in." Relief and dread collided. In the chaos, I had forgotten my medical checkup. I assured the nurse I was fine, rescheduled, and hung up. But the call left me shaken. My health had been fragile before, and Daniel knew it. How easily could he have twisted a medical complication into an accident? I shoved the thought aside and focused on my plan. That day, I would return to Anna's house. I would step back into the trap, armed with the recorder, and lure Daniel into exposing himself. The thought made me sick, yet determination burned stronger than fear. I could not hide forever. I packed my bag carefully, slipped the recorder into my pocket, and left the motel. My steps were slow but steady as I boarded a bus back toward the neighborhood I had fled. Each stop brought me closer to danger, but also closer to justice. When the bus finally screeched to a halt near their street, I hesitated. The houses looked innocent. Children's bikes scattered on lawns, flowers blooming in tidy gardens. How deceptive appearances could be. I walked the last block with my head high, though inside, every nerve screamed. The house came into view, its curtains drawn, its walls hiding the darkness I knew too well. I paused at the gate, inhaled deeply, and whispered to myself, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." Then, I lifted the latch, stepped onto the path, and prepared to face the devil with his own words. If you are watching this, subscribe and tell me if you would dare walk back into the house after escaping once. The next chapter of this story will leave you questioning every smile behind closed doors. The key felt heavier than it should have, a simple piece of metal that carried the weight of dread. As I stood on the porch of Anna's house, the one I had once called a sanctuary, I stared at the door and wondered if it would open to welcome me or swallow me whole. The recorder sat snug in my pocket, switched on, its tiny red light blinking like a secret heartbeat. I pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed inside. For a moment, silence pressed back at me. Then the lock clicked, and the door swung open. Anna stood there, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with fatigue. She looked both relieved and exasperated when she saw me. "Mother," she said, her voice a mixture of scolding and concern. "Where have you been? I woke up yesterday, and you were gone. No note, no call. I was worried sick." Her words might have been comforting, but her eyes flickered nervously over her shoulder. She was hiding something, or rather, someone. "I needed some time to think," I replied, keeping my tone even. "May I come in?" Anna stepped aside reluctantly. The air inside smelled of freshly brewed coffee, and something more metallic, something I could not name. My legs trembled, but I forced them forward, crossing the threshold as though I were walking into enemy territory. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, dressed in his casual work clothes, a mug of coffee steaming before him. His eyes lifted to meet mine, and the corner of his mouth curved into something between a smile and a sneer. "Well," he drawled, setting his mug down, "the runaway returns. We thought you had lost your way." His voice slithered across the room, and though every instinct screamed at me to run, I steadied myself and answered, "I needed some air. Sometimes the house feels too small." Anna moved quickly to pour me a cup of coffee, her hands trembling as she set it down. "Sit, Mother. Let's talk. We need to understand what happened." I sat carefully, sliding my hand into my pocket to make sure the recorder was still on. Daniel's gaze followed the movement, his eyes narrowing slightly. For a moment I thought he had caught me, but then he leaned back, his smirk widening. "So, you wandered out into the night like a thief," he said smoothly. "That must have been frightening. You are lucky nothing happened to you." I looked straight at him, forcing my voice to remain calm. "I am not so fragile as you think." He chuckled darkly, sipping his coffee. "Fragile is exactly what you are. One wrong step on those stairs, one slip in the bathtub, and everything could change in an instant." The words sliced through the air. Anna flinched, her hand clattering against the cup she held. I felt bile rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down, willing my face into a mask of neutrality. "That is why we care for you," Mother Anna interjected quickly, her voice high-pitched and desperate. "We just want to make sure you are safe here." Safe. The word felt poisoned. I stirred my coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against the porcelain. "It is good to know I can depend on family," I said carefully, hoping the recorder captured the malice dripping from Daniel's tone. Daniel leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his voice lowering into a conspiratorial whisper meant to unsettle. "Family can be both a blessing and a burden. The trick is knowing which side of the line you fall on." My hand tightened around the spoon until it threatened to bend. I wanted to strike him with it, to scream at Anna to open her eyes, but I forced myself into silence. Every second I endured was another second of evidence. After breakfast, Anna insisted on showing me the garden. She pulled me toward the back door, her grip firm, her smile plastered on but her eyes betraying unease. As we stepped outside, I inhaled the scent of roses and cut grass, the normalcy of it mocking the storm inside. "Mother, why did you leave?" she whispered urgently, away from Daniel's ears. "He was furious. He said you were ungrateful. You know how he can be when he feels disrespected." Her voice trembled. She was afraid of him, even as she defended him. I turned to her, my voice low but steady. "Anna, you must listen to me. He is dangerous. He has spoken things in the night that you cannot ignore." Her face twisted in anguish. "You do not understand. He provides for us. He makes sure we are comfortable. I cannot risk losing that." I wanted to shake her, to remind her that money meant nothing if it was built on deceit and cruelty. But I saw the chains in her eyes. She was trapped in her own prison, built of fear and dependence. Before I could press further, Daniel appeared at the doorway, his silhouette framed by the morning light. His voice carried across the garden like a whip. "What secrets are you whispering out there?" Anna stiffened. I raised my chin. "Just mother and daughter talk. Nothing for you to worry about." He stepped closer, his smile as sharp as broken glass. "Everything in this house is my concern." That night, I lay awake in the guest room. The recorder rested beneath my pillow, its tiny light blinking faithfully. My ears strained for any sound. The house creaked, pipes groaned, footsteps shuffled in the hall. Then I heard it. Daniel's voice, low but clear, seeping through the thin walls. "She is a liability. Anna, you know it. One wrong move and we will have nothing left. Better to plan than to wait for disaster." My blood froze. I pressed my ear against the wall, praying the recorder caught every word. Anna's reply was muffled, but I caught fragments. "I cannot. She is my mother, please." Daniel's tone sharpened, no longer a whisper but a hiss. "You think she will live forever? Do you want to sacrifice everything for a woman who clings to life out of stubbornness? One accident is all it would take. The world would weep for a frail old woman, and we would be free." I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. My body shook with rage and terror, but I held still, held silent, letting the machine beneath my pillow capture his confession. The footsteps retreated, their voices fading into the distance. The house settled again into uneasy quiet. I lay there in the dark, clutching the recorder, my heart pounding. I had what I needed: proof. His words, his intent, his malice. Sleep never came. Instead, I stared into the shadows, promising myself that by morning, the trap would begin to close on him instead. If you are watching this, subscribe and tell me, would you have the courage to stay under the same roof as the man plotting your death just to gather evidence? The next chapter will make you question the loyalty of those closest to you. The morning light spilt across the kitchen counters, cold and uninviting. I stood by the window, watching my son-in-law Brandon move through the living room with that same arrogant confidence he always carried. The kind that makes people think the world revolves entirely around them. My stomach was a knot of fear and fury. Every calculated step he took reminded me that the trap he had been weaving around me was almost complete. If I made a single mistake, everything could be lost. I could no longer trust the timing of my own breaths around him, and I knew every sound in this house might betray me. Breakfast had become a theater performance, with Brandon as the lead actor and me as the unwitting prop. I poured myself a cup of coffee, hands steady despite the turmoil inside. I had to stay calm, absolutely calm. Any hint of suspicion or hesitation on my part would alert him that I was awake to his scheme. This had been happening for months. Subtle manipulation designed to make me seem unstable to my daughter. Sarah, he had underestimated me at every turn, thinking my age and quiet demeanor made me incapable of countering him. He did not understand that decades of experience, years of observing human behavior and the lessons from my late husband, Frank, a former detective, had taught me how to read predators. I remembered the night I first overheard him whispering in the living room. His voice was low and urgent, the words carefully chosen. I had not been able to catch everything, but the intent was unmistakable. He was planning to remove me from the house, to isolate me, to gain complete control over my finances. The audacity of the man had sent my blood cold, but it had also sparked something deep within me, a determination that would not allow him to succeed. From that moment, every action I took had been deliberate, strategic, and methodical. Brandon had begun his day in predictable fashion. As if his confidence could shield him from the consequences of his intentions, he brewed his coffee, checked his phone, and hummed a tune that was irritatingly casual. The sort of hum people use when they believe nothing in the world could touch them. Today, however, he would not remain untouched. I had spent hours planning the next phase, ensuring that every detail of his morning routine would play into the trap I was setting. I moved quietly, making my way to the desk in the living room. The phone he had carelessly left behind earlier was an opportunity I could not afford to waste. I took it in my hands, noting the sequence he used to unlock it. A combination of numbers tied to a date only he would consider memorable. My hands did not tremble as I entered the code. The screen lit up, revealing call logs, messages, and details of conversations that proved his deceit. Each line of text was like a dagger, a confirmation that the threat I had sensed was real. I photographed every piece of evidence, carefully ensuring I did not alert him to my presence. Sarah had been completely blind to the situation. Her trust in her husband was absolute, and that trust had been exploited with precision. Every carefully crafted lie, every staged incident of confusion, every exaggerated story about my supposed decline had been designed to convince her that I was incapable of managing my own affairs. I had played my part flawlessly, pretending to forget things, acting clumsy, and allowing him to take the lead in manipulating her perception. But now, the game was shifting. The sound of the front door opening startled me, and I turned just in time to see Sarah leaving for her shift at the hospital. Her expression was tired but trusting. She kissed me on the cheek, whispered that she would be back late, and left without a hint of suspicion. The moment the door closed behind her, Brandon's mask would fall. I had limited time, and I needed to act with precision. I retrieved the documents I had prepared over the past days, all evidence pointing to Brandon's manipulation and deceit. Photos, text messages, call logs, and financial records were neatly organized, ready to present to authorities. But this was more than just a legal matter. This was a test of strategy, of patience, and of timing. If I moved too quickly or too carelessly, the entire plan could unravel. Brandon appeared in the kitchen moments later, humming his tune as if the universe had conspired to favor him. His eyes scanned the room with complete certainty that he was in control. I watched him, noting every subtle gesture, every small shift in posture. Confidence is often the first sign of vulnerability, and I intended to exploit it fully. "Good morning," he said, his tone friendly but laced with condescension. "Did you sleep well?" I smiled faintly, maintaining the facade of the slightly disoriented elderly woman. "Yes, thank you." The bed was very comfortable. My words were calm, but inside, my mind was racing, calculating the next steps, preparing for the confrontation that would force him to reveal everything. Brandon moved toward the refrigerator, pulling out milk for his coffee, speaking as though the house belonged entirely to him. He did not notice the small camera I had positioned on the countertop, discreetly capturing every word and action. Every detail mattered. This evidence would be crucial when the authorities arrived. I began setting the table, keeping my movements deliberate and unhurried. Every sound, every placement of a cup or plate, was measured to avoid drawing suspicion. Brandon's attention remained on the mundane tasks of breakfast, completely unaware that the trap had been set and the net was closing in. I recalled the first time I had suspected his intentions. It had been during dinner, a few weeks prior, when he had casually suggested evaluating my mental state. A suggestion that seemed innocent at the time, but the way he had watched me, the way his words had dripped with calculated concern, had set off alarms. He had been testing me, gauging my reactions, seeing if I would falter. I had not. I had remained perfectly composed, masking my awareness with polite nods and faint smiles. The sound of the shower running upstairs reminded me that he would soon leave the house unattended. The perfect moment to move into the next phase. Timing was everything. I retrieved a set of documents from the drawer, carefully placing them in the bag I had prepared. The evidence needed to be transported securely to be presented to Detective Ray Collins, a trusted former colleague of my late husband, who had agreed to assist me in exposing Brandon's plot. Every decision I made was now critical. I could not afford hesitation, and I could not afford error. Brandon's arrogance was his weakness. He believed he had the perfect morning routine, that his actions were invisible and untraceable, but he had misjudged me. He had underestimated the resolve and cunning that had been honed over decades of life experience. The kettle whistled, and Brandon moved to pour his tea. I observed him carefully, noting the rhythm of his movements, the exact position of his belongings. This was the kind of detail that mattered when orchestrating a countermove against a manipulative and dangerous individual. I had spent hours planning, studying his patterns, predicting his actions. Today, that preparation would be tested. I quietly moved to the living room, placing the evidence bag under the couch, within easy reach, but out of sight. I had arranged for Detective Collins to arrive at a specific time, to coordinate the moment when Brandon's deception would be revealed. Every second counted. Brandon hummed louder now, a sign of his overconfidence. Overconfidence is the hallmark of the unwise, and he had supplied me with every advantage simply by assuming I was incapable of action. I prepared a list of instructions for Detective Collins, detailing the sequence of events, the specific points of evidence, and the exact moments when Brandon would need to be confronted. Precision was essential. Any misstep could allow him to manipulate the situation once more. To maintain the illusion of innocence, the phone on the counter buzzed with a new message, and Brandon picked it up without hesitation. He read the screen, nodded to himself, and set it back down, unaware that I had already documented the entire interaction with my hidden camera. Each action he took, each word he spoke, was being captured and would be used to dismantle the narrative he had been crafting. I moved toward the kitchen quietly, my mind rehearsing the confrontation in meticulous detail. When Detective Collins arrived, Brandon would not have the opportunity to manipulate the situation. The truth would be undeniable, the evidence irrefutable, and the manipulation fully exposed. Brandon's laughter filled the kitchen as he spoke to himself. Satisfied with his own cleverness, I resisted the urge to reveal my awareness prematurely. Patience was my greatest weapon. I had waited for the perfect moment, and that moment was approaching. The clock ticked steadily, marking the approach of the precise time I had calculated for the intervention. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, every sound in the house magnified. The tension was palpable. I was fully aware that Brandon could notice the slightest irregularity, any subtle sign of preparedness, and adjust his plan. I could not allow this. I had to remain the calm, seemingly harmless woman he believed me to be. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I had the advantage. He believed he was invisible, untouchable. He had laid his plans openly, discussing them as though no one was listening. He had underestimated the intelligence, resilience, and vigilance of the person he had sought to manipulate. As the shower stopped and water ceased to run, I prepared for the next phase. I checked the bag one final time, confirming that all evidence was securely stored. I moved to the living room, sitting quietly in the chair where Brandon could see me, but showing no hint of awareness. My expression was neutral, composed, and perfectly controlled. Brandon emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, confident and unsuspecting. The stage was set, the evidence in place, and the moment of confrontation was imminent. I waited for the precise time to signal Detective Collins, who would arrive with the authority, skill, and presence necessary to expose the full extent of Brandon's deception and manipulation. The day ahead would determine everything. The trap was ready, the truth prepared, and Brandon's arrogance would finally meet the consequences it had earned. I remained calm, patient, and focused, knowing that the next few hours would be the most critical of my life. The culmination of months of careful planning, observation, and strategy was about to unfold. I was ready to act, and nothing would stop me from protecting myself, exposing the lies, and reclaiming the peace and safety that Brandon had tried to steal. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, as if it had been holding its breath in anticipation of what was about to happen. I remained in the living room, seated upright in the chair I had chosen, watching Brandon move about with casual arrogance. He believed he was completely in control, that no one could anticipate his actions, and that his manipulations had gone undetected. That confidence was dangerous, but it was also predictable. Every person who overestimates themselves leaves patterns, and Brandon had left enough to make my next move inevitable. The evidence bag sat under the couch, perfectly concealed yet accessible. It contained everything I needed to expose him: messages he had sent, recordings of his whispered conversations about me, financial documents proving his attempt to gain control of my assets, and photographs showing his staged acts of kindness that were designed to create doubt about my mental state. I had spent weeks collecting, organizing, and reviewing every detail. I knew his entire plan as well as he did, and I intended to dismantle it with precision. Brandon entered the kitchen, humming the same arrogant tune he used every morning. I noted the position of his phone on the counter, the slight hesitation when he poured his coffee, the way he glanced at the clock as if the day's schedule was entirely his to command. Every movement, every habit, every micro-expression had been documented. He was so consumed with the belief that he was untouchable that he did not even realize how much I had learned about him. I reminded myself that patience was key. Acting too soon could alert him to my awareness. He needed to feel completely safe before the trap was sprung. I moved slowly to the kitchen, carrying a cup of tea to appear relaxed, careful to maintain the illusion of normalcy. My heart was steady despite the tension, and my mind was focused on every detail of the plan. Brandon spoke casually, as though he had no awareness of my presence beyond the ordinary. I was thinking about redecorating the guest room, he said, his tone light but with a hint of subtle manipulation. It would be nice if you let me handle it. I know how stressful it can be to manage things at your age. I nodded politely, keeping my expression neutral. That is very kind of you, Brandon, I said, but I prefer to manage my own space. I find it comforting. My words were simple, controlled, and free of any emotional reaction. I needed him to believe that I was unaware, that his manipulation had no impact. He laughed softly, a sound that grated against my nerves. I just want what's best for everyone, he said, with a faint edge that betrayed his underlying intentions. I could feel the tension in the room, like the air was charged with electricity, the moment just before a storm breaks. I knew he was testing me, trying to provoke a response, to see if I would falter. I did not. I remained calm, watching, listening, waiting. When the phone on the counter buzzed, he picked it up immediately. The screen showed a message from a client, and he read it quickly, nodding to himself. He did not notice the small camera I had placed near the kettle, angled to capture every action without revealing its presence. Every moment he spent absorbed in his routine strengthened my advantage. I moved closer to the couch, subtly adjusting the evidence bag to ensure it was within reach but not visible. I reviewed the sequence of events in my mind. Detective Collins would arrive within the hour, and his role was crucial. Brandon needed to be confronted in a way that left no room for manipulation. The evidence had to be undeniable, the strategy flawless, and the timing exact. I thought about the first time I realized the depth of Brandon's deception. It had been during a casual family dinner, when he had made an offhand remark about my memory, questioning my ability to manage simple tasks. Sarah had laughed nervously, unaware of the full weight behind the comment. Brandon had expected me to react, to become defensive, but I had remained calm and collected. That was when I knew I had to prepare for a longer, more intricate strategy. Every step he took in the kitchen confirmed his arrogance. He moved as if the house belonged entirely to him, ignoring the presence of anyone else. That arrogance would be his downfall. I had anticipated this behavior, and I was ready to use it against him. The camera, the evidence bag, the detailed notes for Detective Collins, all of it was aligned to reveal the truth at the perfect moment. The sound of footsteps approaching the door drew my attention. Sarah was returning home from her shift, looking exhausted but still cheerful. She greeted me warmly, hugging me and mentioning the long day she had endured at the hospital. I smiled and asked about her patients, keeping the conversation light and undisturbed. She did not notice anything unusual, which was exactly how I wanted it. Brandon needed to remain unaware of my full awareness until the moment of exposure. Once Sarah had gone to her room to rest, I turned my attention fully back to Brandon. He was pouring himself a second cup of coffee, humming the same tune, completely oblivious to the danger surrounding him. I studied him carefully, noting the subtle shifts in his posture, the tension in his shoulders, and the occasional glance toward the window, as if he was momentarily aware of being observed. These small details were valuable. They showed cracks in his confidence that I could exploit. I moved to the desk where his phone and documents were kept, arranging my own papers to appear busy while my eyes remained on him. He did not notice the slight adjustments, the deliberate positioning of objects to obscure the evidence bag. Timing was everything, and every second brought me closer to the decisive moment. I recalled the conversations I had overheard him whispering in the dead of night, plotting and scheming to isolate me and gain control over my life and finances. Those whispers had been chilling, but they had also provided invaluable insight. I knew his methods, his language, his assumptions, and his weaknesses. That knowledge was now my greatest weapon. Brandon moved toward the living room, adjusting a picture frame on the wall with exaggerated care. I noted his meticulous attention to minor details, a sign of his obsessive need for control. That need would backfire. People who crave control often overlook the subtle manipulations of those they underestimate. He had underestimated me. I adjusted my position in the chair, checking my watch discreetly. Detective Collins had confirmed the exact time he would arrive. The plan was simple, but required perfect execution. Expose Brandon's manipulation, present the evidence, and ensure Sarah witnessed everything firsthand. The confrontation had to be undeniable. I could not allow room for doubt or excuse. Brandon hummed louder now, moving around with complete confidence. That confidence, I realized, was the perfect signal. The trap was ready. The evidence was secure. Detective Collins was en route. It was time to proceed with the final steps. I quietly retrieved the evidence bag from under the couch, keeping it hidden from his view. Each document, photograph, and recording was accounted for, ready to be presented in a way that would leave no room for denial. I mentally rehearsed the sequence, ensuring that every detail was precise, every reaction anticipated. Brandon walked past me, unaware that the trap had been fully set. He glanced toward the phone, checking a message, then returned to the kitchen. I followed him silently, maintaining the appearance of casual activity, making small adjustments to the room to ensure that every piece of evidence was positioned for maximum impact. The tension in the house was almost tangible. Every tick of the clock, every shift in light, every movement by Brandon brought us closer to the confrontation. I remained calm, composed, and vigilant. My body and mind were aligned with the strategy I had meticulously planned. When the doorbell rang, signaling Detective Collins' arrival, I felt a surge of determination. The time had come, the moment to reveal the truth, to expose the manipulation, and to reclaim control over my life had arrived. I moved toward the door with deliberate calm, prepared to act decisively, knowing that the next few minutes would change everything. Brandon was completely unaware of the storm about to descend upon him. His arrogance, his manipulations, and his whispered plots would all be laid bare. I was ready to confront him, to protect myself, and to ensure that Sarah finally saw the truth about the man she had trusted blindly. The door opened, and Detective Collins stepped inside, professional and composed. I handed him the evidence bag, explaining the sequence of events and the critical points he needed to observe. Every instruction had been rehearsed, every detail accounted for. Brandon turned toward the sound of the door, puzzled by the unexpected presence. His confidence faltered slightly, a subtle but telling sign. He did not yet understand the full extent of what was happening, but the realization would come quickly. I stood tall, my posture firm, my voice steady. "Brandon, we need to talk," I said, calmly but with authority. "Everything is out in the open now. There is no way to manipulate this situation any longer." His eyes widened, confusion and panic flickering across his face. I could see the shift in him, the first signs of the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. Detective Collins stepped forward, ready to handle the confrontation with precision and authority. The moment had arrived, the trap was sprung, the truth was about to be revealed, and Brandon would have no escape. I remained calm, fully aware that every second counted, that every reaction would shape the outcome. The confrontation would be decisive, the exposure complete, and justice inevitable. Brandon's confusion was immediate, sharp, and almost comical, if it weren't so dangerous. His posture stiffened as he saw Detective Collins step inside with the evidence bag in hand. The arrogance that had defined him for weeks seemed to evaporate in an instant. I kept my stance firm, my gaze unwavering, while every instinct screamed to remain calm and collected. I needed him to understand, in the clearest possible way, that the house no longer belonged to him in any sense of the word. "Brandon," Detective Collins said, his tone deliberate and precise, "we need to review these materials. Everything you've done to manipulate, deceive, and control this household will be documented." He held up the evidence bag, allowing the weight of its contents to speak for itself. Brandon's eyes flicked to it, lingering on the papers and recordings. A flicker of panic crossed his face, betraying the carefully cultivated mask of confidence he had worn for so long. I stepped closer to Brandon, speaking clearly and intentionally. "I know everything you have been doing, Brandon. I have known for weeks. Every whisper, every secret plan, every attempt to isolate me and take control of my life has been recorded." My voice was calm, but there was an undeniable force behind it, a clarity that left no room for argument. He looked as if someone had removed the ground from beneath him. "You don't understand," he said, his tone faltering. "This isn't what it looks like. His words stumbled over themselves. I could see the panic beginning to overtake him. The man who had once whispered in the dead of night, plotting and scheming, was now vulnerable. His armor had crumbled, and I was finally seeing him exposed exactly as I had imagined. Detective Collins opened the evidence bag and began, carefully removing the documents, photographs, and recordings. "Everything here," he said, "is verifiable. We have messages, audio, photographs, and financial documents that demonstrate a clear pattern of manipulation and deception. This will not be ignored." Brandon took a step back, his face pale. "You can't do this. These are lies. You have no proof." He tried to regain some semblance of authority, but his voice betrayed his fear. Every movement, every glance, every gesture was a sign of a man trapped by the very strategies he had used against others. I held his gaze steadily, refusing to give him any leverage. "You left proof behind, Brandon. You assumed I would never pay attention. You assumed I would never act. That was your mistake. I have prepared for this moment, and now there is no way to undo what is about to happen." The room was tense, charged with an intensity that could be felt in the very walls. Every heartbeat, every breath, seemed louder than usual. Detective Collins began reviewing the messages, holding them up for Brandon to see. "These messages show a deliberate attempt to manipulate household members and isolate the victim," he said. "They contain explicit threats and plans designed to undermine trust and control assets. This is undeniable." Brandon's composure collapsed further. He ran his hand through his hair, his earlier arrogance replaced with desperate agitation. "This is ridiculous. You don't understand. I was only trying to protect the family," he said, though the words sounded hollow even to him. I took a deep breath and moved closer to him, my voice steady and cold. "Protect the family by whispering about me at night, by trying to control every action, every decision, every person in this house. That is not protection. That is manipulation. That is control." Detective Collins held up a recording. Brandon froze when he heard his own voice. The whispers, intended to be secret, filled the room with their sinister clarity. Brandon's face went from disbelief to horror as he realized the scope of his exposure. He tried to reach for the recording, but I gently held his arm back. "You cannot hide from the truth now," I said, calmly but firmly. "Every plan, every scheme is documented. Every action you took has consequences." Brandon backed toward the door, his voice rising in panic. "You can't prove anything. This is just fabrication. You are making it up to ruin me." His trembling hands betrayed him more than his words ever could. I remained calm, giving him no room to argue. "Fabrication requires intention. Brandon, what I am presenting is reality. You chose your actions, and now the consequences are unavoidable. You left a trail of proof because you never thought I would pay attention. That was your mistake." Detective Collins continued methodically, presenting photographs and financial records that left no ambiguity. Every attempt Brandon had made to disguise his intentions was now fully visible. The layers of deception, the casual arrogance, and the manipulative behavior were all laid bare. He looked from the documents to the recordings, trying desperately to form a coherent response. But there was nothing he could say that would undo the evidence. I spoke again, my voice low and firm. "You whispered about me, Brandon. You planned against me while pretending to care. You tried to isolate me from my daughter and everyone else. You assumed I would never notice, that I would never fight back. That is no longer the case." Brandon's lips quivered, and I could see the realization hitting him. I only wanted." He could not finish. The words fell apart under the weight of the evidence and the intensity of the moment. He was no longer the confident manipulator. He was a man exposed, cornered, and unable to escape. Detective Collins held up the final document, a financial statement showing the attempts Brandon had made to control household funds without consent. "This completes the record," he said. "There is no dispute, no manipulation that can negate these facts. Everything is clear and verifiable." I took a slow step forward, ensuring my presence was commanding and authoritative. "You underestimated me, Brandon. You assumed I would remain passive, that I would allow your manipulation to continue. You assumed wrongly. I prepared for this moment, and now the truth is undeniable. You are exposed for exactly who you are." Brandon fell back against the wall, unable to meet my gaze. He was shaking, a man stripped of all pretense, finally confronted with the reality he had created. I never thought." His voice was weak, a stark contrast to the confident man who had whispered and manipulated for so long. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction, knowing that patience and careful planning had brought this moment to fruition. Every step I had taken, every piece of evidence collected, every detail anticipated, had led to this confrontation. I had reclaimed control, and the truth could no longer be denied. Detective Collins stepped closer to Brandon, speaking with the authority of law and order. "This will be documented and reported. The manipulation, the threats, and the control you attempted are serious matters. You will be held accountable." Brandon's shoulders slumped, his arrogance entirely replaced by fear. He finally looked at me, his eyes wide and filled with a mix of shame, anger, and disbelief. You set me up," he whispered, though even he knew the words were weak. I shook my head slowly, my expression calm and unwavering. "This is not a setup, Brandon. This is the result of your actions. Every whisper, every secret plan, every attempt to control and manipulate was recorded. Every choice you made led to this moment." Detective Collins began documenting everything, making detailed notes and confirming the sequence of events. Brandon attempted to speak again, to offer excuses or explanations, but the evidence was overwhelming. Every argument, every defense was rendered meaningless by the clarity and precision of the records. I stepped back, allowing him space while maintaining control of the room. "You underestimated me, Brandon. That was your greatest mistake. Now everyone knows who you truly are, and the consequences are unavoidable." Brandon sank to the floor, defeated. His attempts at manipulation and control had been dismantled completely. The man who had whispered at night, who had schemed and plotted, was finally confronted with the undeniable truth of his actions. The power he had wielded over others was gone, replaced by the exposure he had so carefully tried to hide. Detective Collins turned to me, nodding with respect. "You handled this with precision. Your planning and awareness made this confrontation possible. Brandon's attempts to manipulate and deceive are fully documented and can no longer continue." I felt a wave of relief and satisfaction. The tension that had gripped the house for weeks began to dissipate. replaced by a sense of clarity and justice. Brandon's era of manipulation had ended, and I had reclaimed the authority, respect, and safety that had been challenged. Brandon remained on the floor, his face pale and eyes filled with the stark reality of exposure. He no longer had words, no defenses, and no illusions of control. Every whisper, every plan, every secret intention had been brought into the light. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the confrontation lift slightly. The truth was revealed, the evidence undeniable, and the manipulator finally exposed. Justice, patience, and careful planning had prevailed, and the house could begin to heal from the shadow Brandon had cast over it. The morning sunlight came through the curtains, but the light did little to ease the tension that still lingered in the house. Brandon's absence from the room did not mean relief. It meant a momentary lull before the storm I knew would arrive. I moved quietly through the kitchen, my mind racing with strategies and contingencies. Every interaction, every possible move he could make, had to be anticipated. I had learned through weeks of manipulation that his mind never rested. I could not afford complacency. The phone rang, startling me. I had expected calls, messages, and inquiries, but the sound still carried an edge of urgency. I answered carefully, my tone calm, yet commanding. "Hello," a familiar voice spoke on the other end, one that carried authority and reassurance. "Margaret, it's Detective Collins. We need to go over some additional details. There have been developments overnight, and I want to ensure we are prepared for anything Brandon might attempt next." I exhaled slowly, keeping my emotions in check. "I understand. I am ready." "What has changed?" "There were some unusual financial movements," he said. "It appears Brandon tried to access accounts and move funds in a way that suggests he was anticipating legal action. It was minor, but it indicates he may try to act unpredictably." I tightened my grip on the phone. I expected nothing less. "What do you need from me?" "Just your presence and continued vigilance. We may need to confront him again if he escalates. I will be there with backup, but your testimony and awareness are crucial." I nodded, even though he could not see me. "I will be ready. Thank you for keeping me informed." "I will be ready. Thank you for keeping me informed." After the call, I began reviewing the documents I had gathered over the past weeks. Every email, every recording, every note I had kept meticulously organized. I needed to ensure nothing was overlooked. Brandon's manipulations had been subtle but consistent, and I had to be certain every detail was accounted for. The house felt quiet, almost eerily so, but I knew better than to assume it was safe. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a message from my daughter. She had been away overnight, but returned this morning. The text was simple. "Are you okay? Should I come over?" I felt a mix of relief and tension. Her presence was comforting, but I could not let anyone underestimate the complexity of the situation. I replied, keeping my message brief but reassuring. "I am fine. Come when you can. We may need to discuss plans." By mid-morning, I heard the faint sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My daughter arrived, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of disturbance. "Mom," she said, her voice soft but urgent, "I heard about Brandon. Are you okay?" I smiled faintly, though my mind remained alert. "I am. Detective Collins has everything under control, and I have the evidence we need. Brandon may try something, but we are prepared." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I can't believe he did all this. I thought he was just overbearing. But this," she shook her head, clearly shaken by the extent of his manipulation. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "He planned carefully, but he underestimated me. That mistake will cost him. We need to remain vigilant, because someone like him doesn't stop easily." We spent the next hour going over the records together. I explained the details, the recordings, the messages, and the financial discrepancies. She listened intently, occasionally gasping or shaking her head in disbelief. The picture of Brandon I painted was stark and undeniable. He was no longer the charming, persuasive man she had once trusted. The reality of his behavior was laid bare. As we organized the evidence, I felt a sense of calm determination. This was the first time I allowed myself to consider the possibility that we had truly regained control. Brandon's influence had been extensive, but it had not gone unnoticed. We were prepared for whatever he might attempt next. Suddenly, a knock on the door startled us both. My daughter looked at me, a question in her eyes. I nodded slightly, signaling her to stay back while I approached the door cautiously. I opened it to find Detective Collins and another officer standing outside. Their presence was reassuring, and I felt the weight of the morning's tension lift slightly. "Thank you for coming so quickly," I said, stepping aside to let them in. Detective Collins nodded. "We received reports of Brandon attempting to contact multiple financial institutions this morning. We are here to ensure nothing escalates and to act if necessary." I guided them to the living room where my daughter and I had organized the documents. "Everything is ready," I said. "We have recordings, messages, and all financial records. He will not be able to manipulate anyone now." Detective Collins reviewed the documents carefully, his expression serious. "This is thorough work. I am impressed with your diligence and foresight. Brandon may try to escalate, but with this evidence, we can respond immediately." My daughter leaned closer to me. "What should we do if he comes here?" I met her gaze firmly. "We remain calm. We do not engage with anger or panic. We let Detective Collins and the officers handle the situation. Our role is to provide clarity and ensure the truth is known." The hours passed slowly. Every sound outside, every car, every footstep carried a sense of heightened awareness. My senses were attuned to any indication that Brandon might appear. I kept checking the recordings and messages, making sure everything was in order. My daughter assisted, her presence providing both emotional support and practical help. Around mid-afternoon, my phone rang again. I answered immediately, recognizing the number as Detective Collins. "Margaret, we have a situation," he said, his tone grave. "Brandon has been spotted near the property. He appears agitated and may attempt to force entry. I recommend you remain inside with your daughter while we handle this." I felt my pulse quicken but maintained my composure. "Understood. We are inside and prepared. How long until you arrive?" "Minutes. Stay calm. Do not engage him directly. Officers are on the way." I hung up and turned to my daughter. "He is here. Stay calm and follow my lead. Do not respond to him unless absolutely necessary. Detective Collins and the officers are coming." We moved to a secure part of the house, ensuring the doors were locked and the windows secured. The tension was palpable, but I focused on controlling my fear and remaining. My daughter followed my instructions precisely, demonstrating both trust and courage. Minutes later, we heard the sound of raised voices outside. Brandon's anger was unmistakable. He shouted, demanding entry, attempting to intimidate anyone who might respond. I felt a surge of determination. He would not succeed. Detective Collins and the officers arrived moments later. They positioned themselves strategically around the property, ensuring no avenue for Brandon to escalate the situation. His presence was bold but futile. He could not bypass the law or the preparation we had made. I stepped forward to address him through the front door. "Brandon, stop. You have no authority here. You are not welcome. And your attempts to manipulate or intimidate will fail." He looked through the glass, his face twisted with anger and disbelief. "You can't do this. This house is mine. You have no right." I remained calm, unwavering. "You have no right. Every action you have taken has been documented. Every plan you have made has been exposed. Leave now, or face the consequences." Brandon hesitated, visibly shaken by the clarity of my words and the presence of law enforcement. His defiance faltered, and I sensed the first real crack in his arrogance. Detective Collins spoke firmly, reinforcing the legal consequences if he did not comply. After several tense minutes, Brandon retreated, muttering threats under his breath. He had been stopped not through anger or confrontation, but through preparation, evidence, and the unyielding resolve of those who refused to be manipulated. I turned to my daughter, relief washing over me. "It is over for now. We have control. The truth is known, and he cannot undermine us." She nodded, her eyes reflecting both relief and admiration. "You were incredible, Mom. I never realized how strong you are." I smiled faintly. Strength is not about aggression or anger. It is about clarity, preparation, and the courage to face manipulation without losing yourself. Brandon underestimated that, and it cost him everything. As the day progressed, the tension gradually eased. Detective Collins stayed for a time, ensuring Brandon had not returned and that all evidence was secure. We reviewed the day's events, confirming the next steps and reinforcing our strategy for continued vigilance. By evening, the house finally felt calm. My daughter and I shared a quiet moment, reflecting on the trials of the past weeks. The battle had been intense, but preparation, evidence, and clarity had ensured our safety and reclaimed our authority. I realized that Brandon's attempts to manipulate and control had only revealed the strength within both of us. His actions, though harmful, had ultimately forged a bond of resilience. strategy, and unwavering resolve that for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of victory. It was not complete, for vigilance would always be necessary, but it was a victory born of careful planning, courage, and the refusal to be intimidated. The house, our sanctuary, had been defended, and the manipulator exposed. We settled into the evening, knowing the battle had shifted but was far from over. Brandon's presence, though momentarily removed, could return, but we were ready. Every recording, message, and document stood as a testament to preparation, clarity, and unyielding determination. The night passed with cautious calm, the events of the day leaving a lasting impression. Brandon had attempted to assert control and failed. The balance of power had shifted decisively. And, as I sat in the quiet, I understood fully that vigilance, strategy, and clarity would always protect those who refused to be manipulated. The house, once shadowed by deceit and whispers, was finally safe, and the path forward was clear. The morning air felt unusually crisp as I stepped outside, the tension from the previous day still clinging to my senses. I had slept fitfully, my mind racing with possible scenarios of Brandon's next move. He had been stopped, but I knew him well enough to understand that his sense of control was fragile. When it shattered, his reactions became unpredictable and dangerous. Every sound, every movement, carried a hint of potential danger, and I could not allow myself to underestimate him again. Detective Collins had assured me that the situation was contained, but assurance did little to ease the knot of anxiety in my stomach. I moved deliberately, keeping 2 well-lit areas, checking the perimeter of the property as carefully as a strategist surveying a battlefield. My daughter joined me, her expression serious, her eyes scanning every corner. She had learned the importance of vigilance quickly, but I could see the traces of fear lingering beneath her composure. "We need to stay alert," I said firmly. "He may have been forced to retreat yesterday, but that does not mean he is gone. He is clever, and desperation can make him dangerous." Clever, and desperation can make him dangerous. She nodded, her jaw tight. "I understand. We can handle this together. We have evidence, and Detective Collins is on our side. But I don't want to underestimate him either." I allowed a small nod, appreciating her maturity. "The key is awareness. We observe, we document, and we remain calm. He thrives on chaos, and we deny him that." Our morning passed in methodical preparation. I reviewed every document again, checking the recordings, messages, and financial records. My daughter helped organize them into a timeline, creating a visual representation of Brandon's actions. It was meticulous work, but it brought a sense of control that had been absent in the past weeks. Control was the only weapon against someone like Brandon, and I intended to wield it fully. Around mid-morning, my phone vibrated with a notification. I glanced at it and saw a message from an unknown number. "You cannot stop me forever. Watch your back." I read the message twice, my pulse quickening slightly. This was expected, yet the directness of the threat carried weight. I showed it to my daughter. "This confirms my suspicion. He is testing, observing. He wants to provoke fear, but we will not give him the satisfaction." My daughter's face hardened with resolve. "We should contact Detective Collins immediately." I agreed and dialed the number. Within minutes, he answered. "Margaret, I anticipated this. Messages and attempts to intimidate are common after confrontation. Do not respond to him directly. Save all evidence, and I will increase patrols near your property. He cannot act without being monitored." Relief mixed with determination filled me. Knowing Detective Collins was prepared gave me confidence, but I also recognized that vigilance was non-negotiable. Brandon had escalated to threats, which meant he was feeling pressure and possibly desperation. This was a critical point in any manipulative game, a moment of weakness that could be exploited if approached incorrectly. We spent the remainder of the morning preparing for the possibility of his appearance. I checked every door, every lock, and every entry point. I instructed my daughter on emergency protocols, detailing how to respond if Brandon attempted to force his way in or intimidate us further. Knowledge, preparation, and strategy had become our armor. By early afternoon, the air shifted. A subtle tension crept in, the kind that was almost imperceptible but unmistakable to those attuned to danger. I could feel Brandon's presence in the atmosphere, even without seeing him. It was a predator's energy, a calculated attempt to provoke and unsettle. A knock at the door confirmed my instincts. My daughter froze, her hand clutching mine instinctively. I stepped forward calmly. "Do not open the door unless you recognize the person," I instructed firmly. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery man holding a package. The uniform and demeanor seemed genuine, but I did not allow familiarity to override caution. I asked him to leave it at the door and step back. He complied, and I retrieved the package carefully. The box was unmarked, and the contents were unclear. I opened it slowly, ensuring my hands were steady. Inside was a series of photographs, taken inside our home, clearly without consent. Brandon had crossed a boundary, escalating his intimidation tactics to invasion and surveillance. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to remain composed. Evidence of his recklessness and obsession was now tangible, and I had to use it strategically. I called Detective Collins immediately. "He has escalated. There are photographs, taken without permission, inside the house. He is pushing boundaries and testing us." Collins's voice was calm, but serious. "Margaret, this is a significant escalation. It confirms my earlier suspicions that he will act out of desperation. Keep all materials and do not confront him directly. I am mobilizing additional support." I hung up and turned to my daughter. "This confirms what we suspected. He is unrestrained now, and we must be meticulous in documenting every move." She nodded, her eyes reflecting both fear and determination. "What do we do with the photographs?" I examined them carefully. "We keep them as evidence. They will show the court his obsessive and threatening behavior. This is a step we cannot ignore. We will use it strategically, not emotionally. Emotion is what he wants. Evidence is what will stop him." The afternoon passed in tense preparation. Every sound outside made us alert, every shadow suspicious. The neighborhood was quiet, yet the tension in the house created a sense of urgency that could not be ignored. I reviewed escape routes, safe zones, and communication lines, ensuring that if Brandon attempted anything, we would have an organized response. By evening, my daughter suggested we take a short break. I agreed, recognizing the importance of maintaining composure and energy. We sat in the living room, the photographs and documents spread across the table between us. The weight of the past weeks and the present threats pressed upon us, but we faced it together, fortified by preparation and resolve. Our conversation turned reflective, acknowledging the danger we had faced and the strengths we had found within ourselves. "Mom, I never realized how manipulative someone could be," my daughter said quietly. "He seemed charming and normal at first, but his true nature is frightening." I nodded. "People like Brandon are skilled at creating illusions. Charm, persuasion, and subtle intimidation are their tools. Recognizing the pattern is the first step, but the second is preparation and evidence. That is how we counteract someone like him." She leaned closer, her voice resolute. "I want to help. I don't want anyone else to go through this. I want to be strong like you." I felt a surge of pride mixed with responsibility. Strength is not born overnight. It is cultivated through awareness, preparation, and courage. You have demonstrated all of those qualities already. We will continue to strengthen them together. As night fell, the house remained quiet, but the underlying tension persisted. We had prepared for confrontation, secured evidence, and remained vigilant. Yet the unpredictability of Brandon's actions kept a constant edge in the atmosphere. A sudden sound from the back of the house drew my attention. I moved cautiously, signaling my daughter to remain still. Shadows shifted, and I could sense movement. I reached for the security camera feed on my phone, scanning the footage carefully. The figure of Brandon appeared near the back entrance, attempting to move stealthily. I called Detective Collins immediately. "He is at the back entrance. Do not engage him. Officers need to handle this." Within moments, law enforcement arrived, positioning themselves strategically around the property. Brandon attempted to flee when he saw the increased presence, but he was cornered by the officers. His desperation was evident, his arrogance replaced by panic. I observed from a secure location as he was taken into custody. Relief and a sense of triumph washed over me, but I remained composed. This was a victory born of preparation, vigilance, and evidence, not chance. Detective Collins approached afterward, his expression serious but approving. "Margaret, this concludes his immediate threat. He will face charges for harassment, trespassing, and attempted intimidation. Your preparation and awareness ensured the situation did not escalate further." I nodded, the weight of weeks of tension finally lifting. "Thank you. It was necessary to remain vigilant. Every move had to be anticipated, every detail accounted for. That is the only way to protect ourselves from someone like him." My daughter approached, placing her hand on my arm. We did it together. I understand now the importance of strategy and calm under pressure. You taught me that, Mom. I smiled, acknowledging both the struggle and the strength we had gained. We learned that control is not about aggression or confrontation. It is about preparation, evidence, and clarity. We denied him the power he sought, and that is how we prevail. As the night settled over the property, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and resilience. Brandon's threats had been neutralized, his manipulation exposed, and our home secured. The path forward was clear, though vigilance would always remain essential. For now, though, the house was safe, and we had triumphed, not through force, but through foresight, strategy, and unwavering determination. The morning light crept through the blinds, but it felt different this time. It was not the usual quiet calm of dawn. It carried the weight of resolution, the lingering tension of weeks spent under fear and manipulation. I moved through the house deliberately, every step measured, my senses alert, yet tempered with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing the threat had been neutralized. My daughter joined me in the kitchen, her expression a mixture of relief and lingering vigilance. "Do you really think it's over?" she asked, her voice cautious. I poured coffee into our mugs and took a slow sip. "For now, yes, Brandon is in custody, and the evidence we collected ensures that he cannot act without immediate consequences. The court will ensure he remains accountable, but vigilance will always be necessary. That is how we protect ourselves." We sat together in silence for a few moments, the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of birds outside creating a rare serenity. It was a stark contrast to the storm we had endured. I felt the weight of the past weeks pressing against my chest, a mix of exhaustion, relief, and an unspoken pride in our endurance. The phone rang, breaking the quiet. I glanced at the screen and saw Detective Collins' name. I answered quickly. "Margaret, I wanted to confirm that Brandon has been formally charged and is under strict monitoring. His access to your property and your life has been legally restricted. The protective measures are permanent unless the court decides otherwise. You have done everything right." Relief washed over me in a wave, steadying my racing heart. "Thank you, Detective. I cannot overstate how much your guidance has helped. I know it was my responsibility to remain vigilant, but your strategy and support made all the difference." He paused for a moment, and then his voice softened. "You were also incredibly strategic. You documented, you anticipated, and you never acted impulsively. That is what made this situation manageable. Your evidence is airtight. He cannot manipulate the system, and he cannot manipulate you anymore." I allowed a small smile, recognizing the truth in his words. It is a relief to hear that. It feels like we have reclaimed control over our lives. After hanging up, I turned to my daughter. "Do you understand now why preparation, awareness, and documentation were crucial? We could not have overcome this through emotion alone. We needed strategy.com and a methodical approach." She nodded, her eyes shining with understanding. "Yes, Mom, I understand. I also understand what it means to protect ourselves without letting fear dictate our actions. I have learned from you, and I will carry this knowledge with me always." Our conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. I approached cautiously, but this time, I did not feel fear. Confidence guided me. Through the peephole, I saw Detective Collins standing there, his presence a reassuring confirmation of security. I opened the door. "Detective Collins, is everything settled now?" He stepped in, his expression serious but approving. "The immediate threat is neutralized. Brandon is detained and formally charged. All protective measures are in place. You can resume your life without fear of harassment. However, I wanted to check in personally and ensure that both of you feel safe and supported." I nodded, grateful for his presence. "We do. Your guidance and swift response have been invaluable. I feel like we have finally regained control." He looked at my daughter and smiled. "And you have learned a crucial lesson in resilience, strategy, and courage. Both of you have been exemplary in handling this situation. Very few people manage a threat like this with such composure and foresight." As he left, the house felt lighter, freer than it had in weeks. I moved through the rooms, noting the small details, the sunlight streaming through the windows, the faint scent of flowers on the counter, the normalcy that had once felt unattainable. It was a reminder that life, even after intense disruption, could regain its rhythm and its peace. I paused in the living room, reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The fear, the manipulation, the near constant vigilance had been exhausting. but it had also revealed strength I did not know I possessed. I realized that survival was not merely about avoiding danger. It was about facing it with clarity, strategy, and courage. My daughter joined me, holding my hand. Mom, what we went through will stay with us, but I think we are stronger because of it. We can face anything now. I smiled at her, feeling a deep sense of pride and protection. Yes, this experience has shown us the importance of self-awareness, preparation, and mutual support. We have created a shield that is both mental and physical, and it is stronger than any threat he could ever pose. The evening approached, and we decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, the air cool and refreshing. As we walked, I noticed the subtle signs of life returning to normal, the neighbors tending to gardens, children playing quietly, the distant hum of daily routines resuming. It was a visual confirmation that life could continue, that we could reclaim our space and peace. As we returned home, I felt a sense of finality settle in. Brandon's manipulation and threats were no longer a looming presence. The legal system, combined with our vigilance and strategy, had ensured that he could not intrude upon our lives again. I understood now that victory was not simply about stopping him physically, but about reclaiming control and dignity in the face of intimidation. That night, we sat together in the living room, reviewing the evidence one last time. Every document, every photograph, every message was a testament to our persistence and clarity. We had faced a skilled manipulator, someone who believed fear could dominate, and we had countered with strategy, evidence, and composure. My daughter looked at me with admiration. Mom, you taught me what it means to be brave and strategic. I will never forget this. I placed my hand on hers, feeling the bond and strength between us. This is what matters. Knowledge, preparation, courage, and unity. Those are the tools that defeat manipulation and fear. Days passed, and the house returned to its rhythm. I no longer walked with the constant tension of anticipation. I could sleep through the night, knowing that our home was secure. The shadows of fear receded, replaced by awareness and confidence. Detective Collins visited occasionally, ensuring that the protective measures remained effective and that Brandon's legal actions were proceeding as expected. Each visit reinforced the reality that control had returned to us and that our vigilance had been validated. One afternoon, I found myself in the garden, watching flowers bloom and sunlight filtering through the trees. It was a moment of pure peace, one that had felt impossible just weeks ago. I realized that strength was not just about facing danger, but about finding beauty and calm in the aftermath. It was about reclaiming life on our terms, rather than letting fear dictate our existence. My daughter joined me, carrying a tray with tea. She placed it beside me, smiling. Mom, we survived. And we did it together. I think we are ready for whatever comes next. I took a deep breath, feeling gratitude and resolve. Yes, we have learned that preparation, awareness, and courage can overcome even the most manipulative and threatening people. Life continues, and we are stronger than we ever imagined. In that moment, I understood the true depth of victory. It was not only legal or physical, but emotional and psychological. We had reclaimed our confidence, our safety, and our peace. Brandon's actions could no longer control us, and his attempts to intimidate or manipulate were rendered powerless by evidence, vigilance, and courage. The night fell peacefully, the house bathed in calm and quiet. I felt a profound sense of closure, knowing that the immediate danger had passed and that we had emerged stronger, wiser, and resilient. Our lives were no longer dictated by fear but guided by awareness, preparation, and unwavering strength. As I looked at my daughter, I saw the reflection of our journey in her eyes, fear transformed into courage, uncertainty into clarity, vulnerability into resilience. Together, we had faced darkness and emerged into light, stronger than ever. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to relax completely, trusting that the strategies we had implemented, the evidence we had preserved, and the vigilance we had maintained would continue to protect us. We had survived, and we had reclaimed our lives on our terms. The journey had tested every ounce of strength, patience, and intelligence within me, and I had risen to the challenge. I knew that the lessons learned would stay with us, guiding us in all future endeavors. We had faced a manipulator who thrived on fear and control, and we had dismantled his power through awareness, preparation, and courage. That night, as we turned off the lights and closed our doors, I felt a deep sense of triumph and calm. The house was safe, the threat neutralized, and our lives restored. We had not only survived but had grown stronger because of it. The path forward was ours to define, free from manipulation, free from fear, and filled with the confidence that we could face any challenge with clarity and strength.